Welcome everybody to the Female Disruptors March event where we are focusing on women making history. And we're waiting for everybody to come into the room. Just want to thank everybody who is here now and let you know that I'm going to be making some announcements at the end of the event, at the end of the day, some exciting announcements involving crypto and some giveaways and some news regarding female disruptors. We just started a Discord community, so you can actually, if you are attending this via Zoom, you can check out the Discord. We'll put it in the chat. Hopefully Zach is on and he can put the link to the Discord here. He just put it in the chat. And if you go to Discord, you can also have the opportunity to watch this event for the rest of the day through spatial.io. And actually see it in a metaverse type of setting. So we have it all set up for you. So that's exciting. So without further ado, let's get started. I want to introduce Dana Todd, who Dana and I go way back, and she is, again, one of my original female disruptors that I met in my career. And thank Dana for inviting me to speak on my first session ever at Search Engine Strategies when I was like, I don't know, I don't think I'm qualified to speak, which we were just talking about in the last session. Females need to just push themselves, even if they don't think they're qualified, they are, and just, go for it. So at that point, Dana and I were in the internet marketing industry, and Dana was talking about PPC. I don't know if you remember that, Dana.
Oh, yeah.
And
back when it was a new concept.
Yeah, so Dana has been the founder of several tech startups, and most currently, she is the founder and CEO of Balodana. And Dana, I'm going to let you kind of take it from here and share your journey as a disruptor, because you've gone from MarTech to fashion tech, which is super exciting. And I love what you're doing. And tell us a little bit about your journey being a female disruptor.
Thank you. Well, gosh, I guess in my career, I didn't really realize I was disruptive. I was just always that really annoying person who asked all those questions about why is it this way? Why can't it be that way or a different way? So I guess I think a lot of women suffer from this, the question asker syndrome. You're often seen as more of an interrupter than a disruptor. So I think I probably started out more as an interrupter, but I'll continue to hold that role, I think, always. The other thing I do is collect a lot of people who are like-minded. So literally when I was in high school, I tried out for cheerleader. I did not make it because gravity is extra strong for me. There's no herky, no jumping in my world. So I just started my own pep club, and I got all the misfits, and we had matching t-shirts, and we all sat in the stands and had our own thing and cheered, and we ended up having a lot more fun, and it was a whole lot easier because I was like, why does it always have to be this way? Why can't I do something my own way? And so yeah, that's been the story of my life, is rejection by a system, finding a different way of having just as much fun or accomplishing just as much or more using something completely different. So you mentioned the digital marketing. That was really the first place that I found a home for people like me, because I love digital because it actually embraces folks like me. It says, hey, disruptor, come on in, let's have a beer and talk about what we need to change. And so I've just always loved being in this space. It's where I feel the most comfortable, no matter how digital is being applied, no matter how technology is being applied. So as you mentioned, I started out on the sort of service side of things as a digital agency. And back then, traditional advertising and marketing very much rejected digital marketing, and particularly search marketing, which was kind of my specialty. And I remember talking to the head of an extremely large and very famous traditional agency who told me drunkenly at a cocktail party, your entire industry fits into my pinky, and I can move the needle. You can't do anything with your tiny little digital. And it's just really, I think back on that now, and now, of course, digital advertising is essentially, 50 cents out of every dollar, if not more, in the advertising industry. So yeah, that little tiny lever repeated millions and millions and millions of times can actually make a lot of changes. So fast forward, we had a startup in San Diego called News Forest. I was trying to save the news industry, and at the same time, I was asking questions about why is it that I can't get news placed anymore, right? You know this from your PR background, right? Like why is it so hard? Why do I have to hire an agency who like knows a person who knows a person who knows a person who might be interested in your story? And it's all about the Rolodex, right? It was really all about those connections, and you had to earn your way into that system. And I was just like, why? I don't understand. Why can't I just sort of buy my way in here? And so we had an early content, woo, sorry, I lost my phone there. We had an early sponsored content module, that a whole system that basically was native advertising before native advertising was a thing. So that's where we got started with that. And then I came to Chicago, and a few years ago felt really frustrated by, once again, I'm rejected by the fashion system. I cannot find clothes that fit my body. I have a slightly different body now as a mature person, and not having my usual crazy colored hair. I wanted to spend money, and nobody would take my money because nothing would fit me. And I'm like, this is ridiculous, right? It's utterly ridiculous. What I found is that 75% of women, no matter what their age or body type is, are frustrated by the fashion sizing industry. And so thus I started asking again, why do I have to go through this system? Why can't I make my own supply chain? And why can't it be custom, right? And better yet, why can't it be made to my measurements? And so Balodana was born out of that. It's the only marketplace in the United States, and frankly, one of very few in the world, that are 100% custom made to measure clothing. So we're like a very small specialized Etsy or Amazon, but we only do women's made to measure. And we have technology backing it to help perfect that process. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm breaking rules and asking questions and making friends in the digital, in the fash tech. It's a new thing, like fash tech, right? Building walls there that are a little more transparent.
I love that. And just a couple of things I want to point out about your journey and your story for other women and men that are listening here. So you started out in, you said you found your place in digital marketing and search marketing. And to be a founder today, I think it's like very critical to understand the dynamics of just having a basic understanding of digital marketing, much less being super experienced like you are in digital marketing and being a CEO of a startup, because you can see through, all the fakes out there. You can say, look, this is exactly what, what to look for, what to ask for, and what to ask to be reported on. And I think that any C-suite who isn't familiar with digital marketing and didn't really start we both kind of from day one and learning as things evolved, to catch up today is pretty hard. And I think to manage any type of marketing from the top down without having that foundation, it's like speaking a different language. So I think that's like a very important way to stand out as a disruptor and be able to really, manage a brand or manage a company, even if it's your personal brand, by having that basic experience or even intermediate experience. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the key technology is key to everything these days. We live our lives immersed in technology, from our smart toaster in the morning to our, to our quiet time at night on our phones. Like, we're immersed in this. And so if you expect to get ahead, you must learn the tools. You really must. And it's not that hard. I have people all the time like, oh, I'm not techie. I am not techie. I can barely operate a fax machine. Trust me. And yet, I'm a tech leader because I've gotten further ahead than I think sometimes I'm even aware of, just by being familiar with and utilizing and trying new things. One of the things I love about you is you're like, oh, go over to your Discord and try out this new thing. And I'm like, oh, she's so cool. She's always trying the newest thing. Even if I think sometimes we are afraid to fail, right? And some of the people like yourself, there's another woman at Remedista, Kelly, and she's always like, just do this. Even if we fail in public, we're just going to do it. We're going to try it, right? Let's just do it, and let's put on a show, or let's do a production, or let's make an award show, or let's build a program. Let's build a whole community and network of people, even if it's a spectacular failure, which usually it's not, right? Let's just do it. Let's break things.
I love that. And I can remember sitting at having a glass of wine with you not too long ago and telling you my story about I was in the process of trying to buy my Boss Beauty NFT.
Yes.
And I was telling you how somebody, that was helping me kind of do this and what I was learning. And you're like, Lisa, you need to put that in your LinkedIn bio that you're a crypto coach. I'm like, what? I'm not a crypto coach. I can't say that. And you're like, yes, you can. How many other people do it when they, and all of a sudden they're the crypto coach or the, PR disruptor or female disruptor. And it's so true.
Yeah. And we have a tendency to call that fake it till you make it. But I don't think it's really faking if you're, especially in an emerging field like this, right? You may only be 20 minutes ahead of someone else, but you're 20 minutes ahead of someone else, right? So own it, right? Absolutely own it. And by the way, you coached me through my Coinbase issue and I finally solved it thanks to you.
We're all coaching each other through this whole Web3 crypto. That was one of the things we were talking about at the very end of like the little panel that we did was just, transitioning from Web2 to Web3 and, the opportunity that exists for everybody, really. It's a huge opportunity, whatever your gender or age, to jump right in.
Yeah.
And just what does that transition look like, but especially for women. Yeah. And, it's this, we have to really help each other to take advantage of this window that's like wide open right now, but like in a year, it's going to be closing. And if women don't jump in and take advantage and help each other, then it's going to be, from what I've read, the statistics, worse for women if we're not taking advantage of this opportunity with crypto and Web3.
Absolutely. And I think, you have to be comfortable with a lot of ambiguity. And I think all people, men and women, there are a lot of us who are not comfortable with ambiguity. And so that's probably part of one of the keys is that you have to get comfortable with discomfort, right? You have to be prepared that you won't have the answers and go ahead anyway, right? You got to be a little bit brave and a little bit stupid, but ultimately you'll find your way through.
But you've mentioned, a couple things about what it means to be a woman disrupting. What are some other, what are some actionable tips that you see that have worked for you in the past, or that advice that you would give to be a disruptor?
Well, I mean, obviously my own path is going to be different than everyone else's, but I think honestly, anybody can be a disruptor. It doesn't always have to look loud. Like, I think a lot of people think disruptors are loud and they come in and they break things and they smash the patriarchy or what have you. But in reality, I think a lot of more disruption is happening at the enablement side of things. And just I do think you have to have some power, right? So you have to have some component, something that you own, whether it's a little piece of the equation or a really big piece of the equation. And you leverage that power, leverage that strength. So, one of the things one of the stories I love here in Illinois, we have a comptroller named Susan Mendoza, and I went to one of her fundraising things. I'd never even heard of her, and bureaucracy, right? And she was telling the story of how when she became the city clerk, she was literally the first woman as a city clerk, and she got in there, and we do city vehicle stickers, which are an extra tax on you if you have a vehicle in the city, and every year, just like when you do your vehicle tag, it's a once a year thing. It's every April, and there's this crush, and it overloads the system, and it's a bureaucratic nightmare, and it all had to be done on like paper, and it was just such a horrible thing. As she got in there, she was like, okay, why do we have to do this as a once a year thing? She just asked that one question, like, why? And everyone kind of looked at each other like, well, because we always do it this way, right? She was like, well, what if we made it a year-round thing so people could just buy their sticker whenever? And it just had, and they were just like stumped by that. And so she built a system that now, churns out millions of city stickers all year round. There is no season. It's all online. It's just it's reduced their cost of managing this ridiculous process, and thus obviously increased the revenue side of things for the city. So that one little thing, just asking one question with a little bit of power and a little tenacity to get in there, roll up her sleeves, get a little bit technical, and fix things, can be done. So I really think that anyone can be a disruptor. It doesn't require any special power, qualities or superpowers. You just got to be willing to be tenacious at that.
I love that. And now being in the fast tech industry, what's disrupting? What does it look like being in that industry? And maybe also share with us. I mean, I know you've gone through you're trying to raise money and get investors, and the numbers of women-led companies getting their share of investment money is really, really scary. Like it's like 2% for
And
white women-led companies.
it
And
went
yeah,
down during the pandemic, not up. Oh my God. Even after all the data was out there and all the attention to this, it did not get better, actually. It really didn't. So it is a struggle because one of the key components to making disruption stick and grow and truly be disruption is capital, whether it's human capital or financial capital. You do need capital, right? So you have to find someone to believe in you enough to write a check, enough to show up to an event like this. You have to build that network and that component of believers and fans. So I do love that there have been some other changes recently around crowdsourcing and crowdfunding that don't look like the old, WeFunder and things, or actually WeFunder is one of the newer ones, but that doesn't look like like the charity events and things like that you see out there now. Some of the early bootstrapping platforms, they're still there and they're still going strong, but even those are heavily male dominated, to be honest, and very product dominated. They're not really founding and funding big ideas, big disruptive ideas that are system changers, like what we're trying to do as part of the fast tech community. Really just asking questions around like, okay, why do we have to have minimum order quantities? Or why can't you just make one t-shirt? Why? Why? But to get there, to be able to scale on demand is going to require billions of dollars. Fashion is a $6 trillion industry, and it's a $6 trillion highly entrenched industry. And most of the technology that can fix it is barely funded, if at all. So there's only a few power players in this space, and they've always looked at it like traditional hardware and software makers. They're like, we make machines, and then we make software that runs the machines. They're not thinking of ecosystems that could come out of this that are different than just the way they've always done things. So there's so much entrenchment in that system. What I'd really like to see, in addition to capital, is people coming in with business models that can grow and scale. So, a few years back, we were all excited about Rent the Runway because they came in with a completely different business model. Now you've got companies like ThredUp and some of the other used clothing platforms, and even some of the used luxury platforms that are, again, looking at a different business model and surprising people that, oh, hey, actually people were buying it and lots of it. And we're starting to prove that the old system doesn't have to be, but we need a lot more capital in it now to start to enable a truly end-to-end set of opportunities. So going back to my earlier mention about Google and digital marketing, right? So Google didn't eat advertising. Initially it did, yeah. It definitely hurt a lot of middle players. A lot of people fell in the meantime, but it ultimately added trillions of dollars to that. So true disruption doesn't just destroy something. It actually creatively rebuilds and goes beyond the original. That's what you hope for. It's always what you hope for.
I agree. And looking at, there's a lot of like, I started Female Disruptors. There's a lot of women-led projects, whether it's an NFT collection or whether it's, focusing on raising money for women-led companies. Like that's happening. I see it more than ever. And I think that's all great. I still feel like it's the 1% still is really the ones getting the attention. Like World of Women is doing amazing and they just got funded by Sandbox, and that's like awesome, huge. But coming from my end, and in our conversations, I think it falls the same with you. It's still extremely difficult. It's to put on this event, to put on my January event, to get support from brands, women-led, male-led, that believe in the mission and vision, to actually take action, and so this, Female Disruptors is maybe a small example, but using you as an example where you're trying to raise money and get investors, it's still extremely hard, even with all of the awareness. And I'm just asking you, is this awareness like kind of just noise, or do you feel like we're really moving the needle towards
I think
improvement?
maybe I'm cynical, but I think, well, both are true. Both can be true, right? I think a lot of the stories we hear out there are still anecdotal, but you have to start somewhere, right? The more stories that the people with money, e.g. men, right? The more stories that they hear about successes, the more proof points that they have about these successes will ultimately change things, right? So in our space, I'm actually going back to my roots of building nonprofits. I built a coalition called the Open Circle Apparel Coalition with some other like-minded people, and we're going to be trying to tell these stories to the press and make sure that people understand what the opportunities are here in the overall fashion tech and garment industry, for technology to play and for new business models to play. So I do think you need a collective voice, and so you have to take all those anecdotes, stitch them together, and spoon feed them, honestly, to someone. I think you still do need, you need the benefactors who are just going to blindly invest. And that's where you kind of get into what I call stupid money. These are not stupid people, by the way, but it's the money that you have to drop on a yacht without blinking, right? That's the kind of money that needs to come in, and stop asking women so many stupid questions in an investment scenario, right? Like, it's not going to scale. What are you going to, I mean, they're asking, sometimes some of the questions you get are the same dumb questions you get as a male founder, but you do get more dumb questions as a woman. And you
Totally.
also, yeah, and you get things like I've consistently had when I pitch to men investors, things like, literally, like, one of them was an angel, and he was like, well, let me ask my wife. So there's always the let me ask my wife, if a woman's thing is going to work, right? And I finally pushed back on a couple of young investors one time. These are guys in their 20s. I figured would be pretty woke, right? They had a small VC firm doing early stage. And I was like, do y'all realize that you don't express any discomfort being asked to think about business models that are far beyond your background, right? Like, really, you're looking at biotech stuff, right? You're looking at things that are not just what you buy and what you do. And yet, when I ask you to look at the numbers behind and the possibilities behind something that is essentially female, y'all react like, you've got the flu, right? So what is that? Are you afraid you'll turn gay if you look at this, or you'll turn into a woman? Like, what is that, the resistance behind looking at this, just as you would any other type of investment? They didn't have a lot of answers to that. I didn't get funded, by the way. That's just me and my snarky.
But it is true. I mean, there's stupid money being thrown at, easily thrown at, checks being written to male-led companies right and left.
Yeah.
You're talking about the tech bro culture with Charlene, and that is still a thing, and
Yeah.
it's still happening. And it's like, just take half of that and just give it to a female-led company that, and it's like, look at the equal pay issues that we have right now, and how long we have to work, how many more days we have to work to make the same as our male counterparts, made in a
Yeah.
year. It's kind of ridiculous, but it still happens. Like, that's why with my whole agency model that I walked away from, because I just witnessed so many times where just, the proposal gets signed, no problem if it's, a male CEO of the agency or a male counterpart. There's no pushback. And, then I'm negotiated with down to the wire and asking for a lot more for less. And that doesn't happen. I mean, I've just witnessed it so many times in so many scenarios that it's like, I'd rather just figure out a way to not be in that type of position or service type of industry where you're negotiated down and expected to do twice as much.
Yeah, I do think it comes down to trust, and I think innately, men will trust other men first before they will trust women, just because of how they've been taught not to trust and how they've been taught to think about women. I actually wrote an article about this on Medium one time. It's just like, we've been classified. I was kind of upset about, the game that often men play called F, Marry, Kill. And I was like, why are those our only three choices in terms of how to classify women? Like, why are those the top and only things that when a group of men are presented with a woman, those are their three options? Like, none of these are good necessarily. Marry, maybe, but killing and effing, definitely. It's like, where in there is promote, support? But end. Like none of those options are on the table as a default for how they're being taught from a very early age. So I think we do have to build trust. I think it starts there, right? If you trust me, you will invest in me. And if you believe in my ideas, part of that is rooted in the idea that you don't think I'm crazy. And I think too often women are still considered crazy, right? So if we can get past all of these dumb labels that tear us down, if you look at I mean, honestly, the data out there, if you really looked at the data of who's creating some of the biggest wins out there in the world in technology, it's driven by women over and over and over again. They just don't always need the spotlight. And I think that's unfortunate. So I hope that the news continues to pay attention to those stories.
Yes, and like I shared that story earlier. Why I started Female Disruptors was because I just noticed over and over again, it's still happening that
Yeah.
the most successful females are not getting the fair share of the spotlight. It's still very male dominated and easier to get men media coverage or get them quoted as an expert source than it is females still today. Even with my conference, like just trying to get coverage for it,
Yeah.
the struggle is real. I have a question from Jess that I'll just kind of ask these as they come up. So
Great.
Jess says, so glad you have experience, Dana, with agency world. I work for a digital agency. I'm learning about NFTs by participating and going to for my NFT certification with
Cool.
World Blockchain Council. That's awesome.
Nice.
We're a small company. I'd like to help lead our company in providing NFT services to our local customers. My customers are small to medium-sized companies. Where would you start? Educating my customers alone seems like a monumental task. Well, I can just comment on that, and then Dana, I'd love to hear your.
Sure.
So you're right. When I decided I was almost going to leave the PR industry, and then all of a sudden, like Google and came out, and like it became more exciting to use technology and digital to help not have to rely on journalists. And then Web 2, Facebook and mobile, and we're able to leverage owned media and social media and be our own brand journalists. But that was a huge educational process to my potential clients and my clients. And so only a certain type of client would be willing to take a risk of doing something so innovative and out of the box. And so I think it is going to be like that with Web3, probably harder because it's still such an unknown. So you're right. I think educating customers alone, that seems like a monumental task. What do you think, Dana? What advice would you give?
So I agree with you, and I'm going to add one more thing. So do find the clients that are the ones who like to be out there on the edge. I was fortunate early in my career at Site Lab that we had, and it was the most unlikely client. It was a hot tub client, like a hot tub manufacturer, but they loved to experiment because their team was like, we carve out money every year, right? We have a certain amount that's discretionary for us to try new things. And so anytime we came to them with a new idea, even if they didn't completely implement it, they listened and we might do a trial. But so I would identify the customer or customers who are most likely to try something fun and something new. Secondarily, of course, once you're done with that, write a use case out of it and float it around to everyone else. I guarantee you that you'll have more people to jump on there. So literally just start with that one. The other thing you can do too is we used to do this at Performix, which is one of the Publicis agencies. We had these annual summits for our top clients where we flew them in and we treated them very nicely. But the whole day, we had a couple of days with them where we just spent showcasing new things because they hire an agency because you're supposed to know more than them, right? They want you out there on the bleeding edge telling them what it is and why they should invest in it or try it or why they shouldn't. It's still at the end of the day their choice, but making that, even if it's a simple webinar, making that available to them, I think is very helpful. But they're going to have a hard time with the use case. Even I'm struggling right now. We have a couple of different use cases in technology for blockchain, right? So obviously, there's a lot of people right now are looking at applying blockchain into fabric sourcing, right? So your supply chain would be much more transparent if you could, snap a QR code on your garment and see its entire lineage all the way down to the fiber. So that is being enabled right now through blockchain technology. That's one application. It's going to be hard for lots and lots of people to leverage that, though, to make money. So there may be more opportunity for us in NFTs. But again, if you think about people what they're going to wear in the metaverse, it might be very different from what they wear in real life. So there are new opportunities that are being explored right now, but I think you can definitely find a couple of willing ears and say, hey, we'd like to carve something else to build a use case here. So you might even, if you could talk your boss into discounting the fees a little bit, but I don't think you even have to, honestly. Just find that client who loves to be out there on the edge.
I agree. One of the other things that we did very similar to what Dana's example is, we would still give them what they were asking for in the traditional sense. So let's just say right now it's the Web 2 sense. But we would add as an added value that we would do this, kind of a Web3 experiment that we wouldn't necessarily charge for, but it would be kind of packaged in anyway, so that it wasn't like, well, wait a second, we came for this and now you want to do this. And we know, that's like that's scary to us. So that was one of the things that we would do. And I think another example that you could do, and this might be like a little bit, it's going to screen, the ones that you don't want, but then, you want to keep the doors open and make money because people's mindset is, where it is right now. You could just screen them by saying, hey, we're innovative, we're out of the box. Is that you? Great. If not, then maybe we're not a good match type of thing.
It's true.
And
By the way, big brands always set aside 10% of their annual budget just for essentially R&D, right? Experimental stuff. So if you can get your clients, even small to medium-sized clients, comfortable with the idea of setting aside 10% every year to invest in things that are unknown, they'll typically find big rewards out of that.
definitely. And some of this, some of these experiments, they don't really have to, they're free for the most part. So having a version of this event in spatial and, kind of in the metaverse and in 3D was an option, and it didn't really cost anything. I didn't have to upgrade. I was able to use the free version. So you can do things where you're doing it like in the comfort zone, but then like going out of the box a little bit into the Web3 world. And, there's ways you can utilize NFTs in a way that it's not really costing anything other than just building it out and experimenting and using them, for tickets and things like that. So I think that, definitely for our own growth, like we need to go, consistently on a daily basis, learning what's happening so that when we can then apply it to our own brands, or in an agency sense, apply it to your own clients. If anybody else has any questions for Dana, please go ahead and put them in the chat and I will call them out. Jess says, such great information and advice. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jess, for being here. And feel free, if you have any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And so Dana, what, if we didn't cover anything, I'd love to hear your opinion, your advice, any actionable tips for women, really all genders, on how to level the playing fields.
Well, I think I want to go back to some of the idea around the quiet disruptors. I think, again, quiet disruptors are the most important component. There's a lot of us out there yelling and writing stories, but the quiet ones are the most important people that you can recruit to your team. And I think if you want, Charlene mentioned earlier, like you have to have structure, right? So I think I would layer on to that and say you have to have partners, you have to have a team, whether they work with you or for you is actually probably less important than you have the right group of people, right? So you need a combination of doers and thinkers and people who are going to be, yes, out there knocking on doors and asking people to make change and to enable change. So I think we often don't reward disruptors, but there's got to be a way for us to point them out and talk about their very important role there. And I think too often the disruptors are the quiet disruptors are the ones that we later point to and go, oh yeah, they just kept going. They're the Energizer bunnies, right? Who never gave up. Never give up, because disruption is a long game, y'all. It is a long game sometimes, right?
It is. I saw this graph the other day, and it was like somebody that is very successful now, and people look at that person as just, oh my God, like so successful. But then it's like the timeline of what happened before the success actually kicked in. And, success can be defined in a million ways also, but, talking about his company success, and it was like The first year started out as a writer trying to write a book, failed. Second year decided to be a coach, failed. Next year decided to do freelance work, got one gig, made no money, failed. Fourth year something, fifth year something, and then sixth year started an agency and did something different. But like all of that experience built on that last, where it kicked in. And I think there's something to be said for that. Like, you're not just going to create your side gig and all of a sudden, be, going public in an IPO and, launching NFT collection that's going to be worldwide famous.
Yeah. Well, even if you look at the technology underlying the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine, I think, thank God, this was told pretty widely during the news cycles, was that it was a woman, by the way, who, who had to step down. She was over and over again told that her idea was first not going to work, then okay, it might work, but nobody cares, right? Because it's not sexy right now, and this is what's getting funded, and if you really want your tenure, you're going to write about this, right? So she was told over and over and over again that she should just walk away from this, and it was more than 10 years of believing in this and watching herself be passed by. Lots of other people got passed by, but ultimately, because she patiently built the right people and the right relationships and the right proof points, when her nation turned to her and said, "Hey, we need a vaccine," we were able to turn on something that that had never been able to be done before and may change the future of vaccines as we know it. So I know that's a controversial topic, and so I place it here gently, but pointing to her as a pioneer who didn't just build something and walk away from it. She had the tenacity to stick with it. And again, build the coalitions, build the proof points that she needed to be able to go out there. And now she's got a lot of money, thank you very much. She don't need that tenure.
That's a great story. Dana, what inspires you? Where do you get your inspiration and your drive from when you're feeling like, that meeting didn't go well, that investor said no? Like, how do you keep going?
Certainly I turn to my friends. I actually have a couple of buddies that are my accountability buddies, but also my shoulder crying buddies in the startup. We have startups in completely different industries, but they're my go-to from a program that I did, an incubator here in Chicago called 1871. And so that's the first place I go when I, outside of my family, when I want to cry. And they push you back up. That's one thing. I look at, I'm on a whole bunch of Slack channels, and with mostly men, by the way, mostly men in these little startup communities, but they are always sharing their stories of good and bad, right? And they talk about their failures honestly. And so not that I get happiness out of seeing other people's failure, but it reminds me, pick up, keep moving, right? It will happen. So going to these, reaching out to other entrepreneurs and systems of entrepreneurs who are all going through the same thing. There's a podcast called The Lonely Entrepreneur. There's a bunch of support out there that will just like, get up, keep going, get it. And also, I go to my faith. I have a faith system that teaches you that everything is part of the big universe, right? So, and it's a game of inches, right? Life's a game of inches. Improving yourself, improving everything around you is not always about that big win. It's about the little wins and getting past the bad, the failures. I hate failing. I failed 2 weeks ago. I had a failure and I was so cranky about it. I literally cried. But then when I was tenacious. I kept finding out from them, okay, why didn't we get in? Why did I not get this opportunity? And what happened was ultimately a potentially much larger opportunity that wasn't part of that first one. So don't give up, don't walk away. You can cry, but put your big girl panties back on and get out there.
That could have been me right before this event was starting. I couldn't figure out the Zoom, and I want to thank April. I don't know if she's listening, but I give April a lot of credit. She's in the Philippines, and I know that she's working, her normal 9 to 5, and then she does work for people like me here in the U.S. And she's up until 3 a.m. and gets up at 6 a.m. her time, and she's trying different things to learn, and that's super ambitious. And it's also, you have to stay balanced in a mental health way. And Zach, who's on the chat right now. So he's a female disruptor supporter like crazy. And I met him on LinkedIn during our first event, and he was very ambitious and almost to the point like I was like, whoa, like wait a second, like okay, I'm calm down, like I don't really know. And he's stuck with it, and he's been communicating with me, and he volunteered to start our Discord and to help me create the spatial.io. And he's just here to help and kind of get experience and network. And I think that that's really an example of a disruptor. I mean, it's definitely like it's a hustle, but it's a disruptor in a very meaningful and relationship building way, where some people can be like turned off by that. And you have to also protect yourself, but at the same time, to insert yourself in some of these events and spaces is what you have to force yourself to do, whether it's Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse or a Facebook group or a Slack channel. Like you need to put yourself out there. And sometimes it for females especially, it's hard to just put yourself out there. It's easier to just be like, especially with the pandemic and everybody's working remote, you're not having that interaction of whether it's a conference or a meetup for coffee or something.
Yeah. And the flip side of that too is don't be afraid to ask, right? So if you do need help, no matter what, don't be afraid to ask, because there are people like Zach's and April's out there who are willing to help when you're stuck, right? I think
Yeah.
that's my hardest lesson, is asking over and over again. I'm so stubborn and think like, no, I can do this myself. And we need other humans. We really do. And we need to not be afraid to ask for help.
That is the best advice ever, to not be afraid to ask for help and not be able to raise your hand when you have a question, or whether it's help or a question or you're stuck. Like that's my biggest advice that I give, my younger professionals that I work with is, if you're stuck, you need to raise your hand and tell somebody that you're stuck, because they don't know, like whether it's your professor or whether it's your manager, you're not really sure which way to go or what to do. Instead of just not doing it, you need to raise your hand and say, I'm stuck and I need help. What would you recommend I do? And I see that happening so much on the flip side of what we were just talking about.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's for a lot of women, we're afraid to ask. We're afraid to ask for money for sure. I'm terrified to ask for money. I don't, I just wanted to fall from the sky.
Yes.
And I'm less comfortable with the transactional conversations that men have, right? Men each constantly have transactional conversations with each other without batting an eye or feeling any emotion about it. I'm still getting there, honestly. I still am.
Well, I know that we're coming up on time, and you have a busy schedule trying to raise money and get the fast tech attention in the world. And can you just share a little bit about just a little bit more about your company and about the giveaway, and like what
Sure.
women who might be interested or men who might want to spread the word or be a potential investor? I know that we have. I don't know if Drew is on right now. I made an introduction, but what do you need to know?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I know that 75% of you are frustrated with your current shopping options and the sizing. So I have news for you. You do not have to go through that anymore. We can literally make things from scratch for you, made to measure. We have an unlimited SKU, but we have about 500 items, different styles featured on our website right now, but we're always switching those out. The way it works is that you give us your measurements, and we don't care how you do it, whether you do it with a tape measure or you use some cool technologies that we can tell you about. And once you've done that, once we've got your profile, then you can literally shop from any of our designers. And one of our designers is Sumisura, who are a fantastic suit maker. And they can do like the blazer of your dreams. And that's what Lisa and I were talking about, like just like you want this to be a pink blazer? Sure, no problem. You want it to have 3 buttons, 2 buttons, a wide lapel, a pointy lapel, but pockets this way, pockets that way, no pockets. How do you want it? We can literally do that. So we're giving away a custom blazer from Sumisura in, I think we have dozens, if not 100 different fabrics you can choose from. And we'll help you configure it precisely the way you want and make it precisely to your measurements. And that's a $225 value. And that's our grand prize, or I shouldn't be a grand prize because you're giving away $1,000 worth of your time and expertise, Lisa. But of the physical goods, yeah, we're going to be doing a drawing today, I think, to see
I
who's
would
the
love to
lucky
be giving
winner.
away a physical good instead of my time, to
No, don't
be
sell the
honest.
your time is a physical good in many ways. Yeah.
Well,
But
that's
yeah,
awesome. And I can't wait to get one for myself. And so whoever wins is going to be so lucky, and we'll do like some selfies together somehow on Zoom, or maybe we'll meet in spatial.io and we'll be able to one day wear these blazers on our avatars. That's
that would be
the
cool.
future is not that far away from that. That's happening right now.
True.
Just my calendar is going off like crazy. But thank you so much, Dana. And I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom. And thank you for everybody that's here live. If you're watching the recording, welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do have questions during the recorded version, please feel free to reach out to Dana or to myself, or join the Discord. It's in the link is here, and we'll be sure to answer your questions or get them answered. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Namaste.